Hey guys, I'm Alex. Tonight we're diving into something deceptively simple, the quiet art of waiting. But not the kind of waiting that feels like a waste. No, this is the kind that becomes a teacher. Welcome to Stillness and Strength channel, my quiet little corner of the internet where we breathe, reflect, and return to what truly matters. The world may not be yours to control, but your mind, that's your kingdom. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I love knowing who's on the other side of this quiet night. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're sitting at the edge of something, a decision, a shift, a moment that hasn't quite arrived. You don't know why, but everything in you is whispering, not yet. You feel the tension in your body like a drawn bow, the readiness to move, to change, to act. And yet you wait, not because you're lazy, not because you're lost, but because somewhere deep down you sense this, there's power in this pause. The world is loud in its worship of momentum. Go now, move faster. Don't fall behind. It prizes the instant over the intentional, the fast over the faithful. But you're choosing stillness. And that's where something different begins. You sit in a room that's growing dimmer by the minute. Evening shadows stretch long across the walls. There's a clock ticking, but it feels less like a command, more like a heartbeat. Time isn't chasing you, it's walking beside you. You breathe, you wait. And in that waiting, you begin to notice something. The small creaks of the house settling. The way the air feels heavier just before nightfall. The gentle hum of your own thoughts returning to you, no longer tangled in noise. What if this waiting, this exact, uncomfortable, unspectacular moment is not empty at all? What if it's full? Full of things you were too fast to notice before. Full of chances to see what's really there, not just what you were rushing to reach. There's a quote by Marcus Aurelius you recall. Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. You think about how strange that is in a world that tells you to look outward, act now, accumulate quickly. But right now, you're not doing any of that. You're just being. And this presence feels more like progress than anything you've done in a long time. You remember a conversation once with someone older and quieter. They said not everything grows in motion. Some things bloom only in the stillness. You didn't understand it then. But now, as your body slows and your breath deepens, it lands. Not moving doesn't mean not living. You think about rivers. How sometimes they don't need to roar. They glide. You think about a cat sitting still on a windowsill, perfectly content to observe. You think about stars, how they burn, but from such a distance, all we see is quiet light. In nature, nothing rushes, yet everything gets done. Why do you believe your life must be any different? There's a strange kind of courage in resisting the pull to hurry, in choosing to pause, not out of fear, but out of trust. You're not being passive. You're participating in something deeper, a conversation between you and time. This is the stillness before the shift, the moment before the next chapter where you aren't forcing the page to turn. You're letting the ink dry. You're letting the silence speak. Sometimes it's in this space, this deliberate non-action, that the world rearranges itself around you. You've been here before, though you might not have noticed. Moments before saying something you'd regret and choosing not to. Pauses before making a decision that later saved you. Delays that frustrated you and became blessings in disguise. There's a sacred geometry to waiting, a rhythm to the unhurried life. So tonight, as you listen and lie still, let yourself feel the fullness of now. This isn't the beginning of something grand or the ending of something tragic. This is the in-between, and in-between isn't a void. It's a womb. It's where things begin becoming. You might not see it yet, but something is ripening beneath the surface. You're not wasting time. You're letting time do its work. So here's the first question I'll leave you with tonight. What if the moment you're resisting, this long pause, is the very one shaping who you're becoming? You're sitting on a wooden bench. It's old, the kind that remembers more than it reveals. The wood is smooth where countless others have sat, waited, thought, healed. You didn't mean to stop here, but your legs, and perhaps something deeper, told you to. The sun is moving slowly. Its light shifts through the trees, painting the ground with long, golden fingers. You notice how the shadows stretch and reshape. The bench grows warmer, then cooler. Nothing is in a rush. You begin to watch. It starts with the smallest movement. A leaf fluttering, the light sliding off it, the way the dust dances in the sunbeam. You hadn't seen these things before. You were always walking past them, fast, determined, certain of where you were going. But now you're still. And because you are, the world opens. You remember the Stoic idea. Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. It echoes in your chest. You wonder how many things have bloomed in your absence, simply because you never paused long enough to witness their becoming. There's something healing about this moment. No screens, no alerts, just the rhythm of light, shadow, breeze. The world is moving, but not for you. It's not a show to entertain, it simply is, and for once you are too. You start to realize that the bench, this plain, worn thing, has always been here, ready to hold weight. It didn't complain, it didn't beg for attention, it just waited, and now it becomes your teacher. The lesson that not every step forward requires your footfall. Sometimes the world moves around you, through you. Sometimes waiting is how you join in, not how you fall behind. You think about your life, about how often you felt late, late to love, late to success, late to healing. But what if the lateness wasn't real? What if it was only your comparison, your calendar, your conditioned fear? This moment on the bench, it's a kind of rebellion, a soft one, a graceful defiance of urgency. You don't need to post about it. You don't need to turn it into a plan. You just need to sit, watch, and remember that the shadows you fear, the ones that signal too late, are also signs of time passing exactly as it should. You look up and notice a child playing nearby. She isn't thinking about time. She chases a butterfly, misses, laughs, falls, gets up, chases again. Her joy is unmeasured, free of clocks. You envy her a little, and then you realize she's not a mystery. She's just unburdened. She trusts that what's next will come, that what she's doing now is enough, that if she's on the bench, the world won't end. You think of the many benches you've walked past in your life, in parks, in hearts, in moments where you could have stayed but didn't. Moments you ran past because waiting felt like wasting. But this one, this bench found you. And now it asks, why do you fear waiting so much? Is it because waiting demands surrender? Because it forces you to trust what you cannot control? Because it reveals how addicted you are to progress, even at the cost of peace? You sit back. Let your shoulders drop. Let the earth carry your weight. And for a brief, unguarded instant, you feel it, the freedom in stillness, the quiet joy of being without needing, of witnessing without striving. This is the gift the bench offers you, a return to the present. No judgment, no delay. Just this moment stretching slowly across the afternoon like light across your lap. This, too, is life, unhurried, undiminished, undeniably enough. And so you ask yourself gently, when was the last time you sat not to rest, not to recover, but simply to be? The morning is quieter than you expected. No messages waiting, no calls, no agenda tugging at your thoughts like a child pulling on your sleeve. Just silence, the kind that wraps around you like a soft shawl, unexpected, unfamiliar, and yet not unwelcome. You didn't plan it this way. Maybe something got canceled. Maybe the world simply forgot you for a moment. But instead of filling the void, turning on the TV, checking another app, making another list, you pause. You listen. And what you hear is nothing. At first, it unnerves you. The mind reaches out for distraction like a hand patting a nightstand in the dark looking for the lamp. But there is no switch, no noise to return to, only stillness. And then something else. A whisper, a memory perhaps, or a thought that had been hiding beneath all the clutter of your usual hurry. You didn't know it was there. Now it's rising. This is what silence does. It doesn't just hold you, it reveals you. You think of the Stoics again, of Epictetus, who said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." A strange quote to remember now, but it lands. In silence, without the performance of productivity, you may appear foolish, even to yourself. Useless, inefficient. But what if you're not here to perform? What if you're here to uncover? You sit with the silence a little longer. It begins to take shape not as emptiness but as mirror. It reflects everything you've been carrying. The tension in your chest, the words left unsaid, the grief you convinced yourself you had moved on from. Stillness doesn't ask for a performance, it asks for your presence. And now that you're here, truly here, things begin to rise. A regret from last week, a hope you've been afraid to name, the dull ache of missing someone who hasn't called. It's all here sitting next to you in the quiet, not to shame you, but to remind you that you're still whole, still healing, still becoming. The world doesn't often give you these moments. It sells you noise, distraction, urgency. It rewards you for being always on, always busy, always beyond this moment. But silence, this kind of silence, brings you back. It asks you, who are you when no one's watching? And more, who are you when even you aren't performing for yourself? You sit still, not as an act of discipline, but as an act of surrender. The kind of surrender that doesn't wave a white flag, it simply opens its hands. You recall a time, long ago, when you couldn't sit like this, when silence felt like suffocation, when stillness was too loud with things you weren't ready to hear. But tonight, or this morning, or whatever hour this truly is, you're different, you're softer, less afraid. You realize that silence isn't empty, it's sacred. It's where you meet yourself without the noise of who you think you should be. And slowly, gently, your breath deepens. Your shoulders drop. You're not waiting for anything to happen. You're just witnessing what already is. This space between moments isn't an accident. It's a doorway. A slow, creaking, sunlit doorway to your own inner landscape. You've been away too long, but now you're home. And so the silence becomes a companion, not cold, not empty, but warm, spacious, accepting. It asks for nothing and offers everything. You let your hand rest on your chest, feel the rise and fall, feel the life in you that doesn't need to be earned, doesn't need to be justified, just felt, just honored, just lived. And you ask yourself, not urgently, not to demand an answer, but as an invitation. What truths are waiting for you just beneath the silence you've been avoiding? You remember a door. Not a metaphorical one, a real one. Heavy wood, chipped paint, the kind that makes a dull thud when your knuckles rap against it. You knocked once, waited, knocked again, waited longer, nothing. And so you walked away, confused, perhaps even hurt. You thought it should have opened. You thought you had done enough, said enough, been enough. Now, years later, you realize something. That door wasn't broken. It just wasn't meant to open, not then. There's a strange kind of clarity that comes when time has softened your urgency. The desperation to have things now, to understand now, to get in now, it fades. What replaces it isn't always pleasant. Sometimes it's grief. Sometimes it's silence. But eventually, it's wisdom. The Stoics didn't promise understanding on demand. In fact, they often warned that you may only see the meaning in hindsight, if ever. Do not seek for things to happen as you wish, said Epictetus, but wish for things to happen as they do, and you will find peace. That locked door, it was peace disguised as disappointment. You see it clearly now. If it had opened, you wouldn't have been ready for what was on the other side. Or maybe, just maybe, it was never your door to begin with. How often do we stand there, knocking and knocking, our knuckles raw with longing, refusing to consider the possibility that the door isn't ignoring us, it's protecting us. You think of relationships that didn't bloom, jobs that didn't call back, opportunities that evaporated right when you thought you needed them most. How much bitterness did you carry, thinking life was being unfair? But was it? Or was it being careful? The problem is, when a door doesn't open, the mind screams failure. It doesn't know how to interpret pause. It doesn't know how to embrace redirection without seeing it as rejection. But your soul knows better. Your soul knows timing. It knows that some rooms are too sharp for you right now, that some invitations are actually traps in disguise, that some waiting is safety, not punishment. You breathe, remembering the ache of not getting what you wanted. And then you breathe again, realizing how often that ache turned out to be a gift. A teacher once told you, "No is a complete sentence, but it's also an incomplete story." That story unfolds now. Because with time, you see the doors that stayed shut and the ones that later opened without you even knocking. You see the path that curved in unexpected ways, the detours that felt like delays, and how they became the very road you needed to walk. You touch the memory again, that place where the door didn't budge. It doesn't sting like it used to. It just sits there in your mind, quiet. You no longer curse it, you thank it. Because you know now, not all doors are meant to open. And even fewer are meant to open now. There's a kind of quiet confidence that comes from this understanding. You stop forcing. You stop begging. You stop defining your worth by how many doors swing open at your touch. You begin to trust the architecture of your own unfolding. You begin to understand that timing is not your enemy, it's your companion, a wiser one. So next time you find yourself waiting again, outside something you want, someone you long for, some answer you feel you need, you breathe. You remember the door that didn't open, and you whisper, maybe this isn't the way, yet. Or maybe I'm being spared. Or even simply, maybe this isn't mine. And in that soft letting go, something strange happens. Your shoulders drop. The breath comes easier. The world doesn't feel so adversarial. It becomes, once again, a place that's working with you, not against you. So now, as you sit in this gentle reflection, you ask yourself, which door are you still knocking on, and what would happen if you trusted it to stay closed? You return to a garden you once knew. It's been years, maybe more. The gate still creaks the same way it used to, though the rust is deeper, like it's learned to age without complaint. You pause at the entrance, one hand resting on the frame, not quite ready to walk in. You had stopped tending this place. Life had pulled you away. Back then it felt urgent, necessary. You didn't mean to abandon the garden, it just happened, as neglect so often does, slowly then suddenly. And yet, it grew. The path is partially overgrown now, woven with little weeds and soft moss. But the flowers, the ones you planted long ago without knowing whether they'd bloom, they're here. Some tall and unapologetic, some low and humble, bending with the breeze. And in between, wild things have found their home. You kneel, touch the earth. It's warm, alive. It doesn't resent you. And that's the first lesson this place offers. Life keeps becoming, even without your constant supervision. It's a reminder that waiting isn't laziness, and letting go doesn't mean letting everything fall apart. There are forces at work deeper than your planning, your tending, your striving. Seeds carry their own wisdom. Rain falls on time, even when you're not watching the sky. The Stoics talked often of nature, not as something to conquer, but something to flow with. If you are distressed by anything external, Marcus Aurelius wrote, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. You once thought the garden had been lost, forgotten, but perhaps that was just your mind measuring life through its own narrow lens, mistaking absence for failure, neglect for ending. But the garden had its own rhythm, and in its quiet way it reminds you. Growth doesn't always need you. You walk further in, brushing past tall stalks of lavender and some tomato vines you don't remember planting. It smells of green things, of patience, of effort made real. There's no perfection here, no symmetry or manicured beds, but there's a certain grace in the mess. And maybe that's the second lesson. That life doesn't need to be pruned into perfection to be meaningful. Your old expectations of what should be, by when and how, begin to loosen. This place didn't wait for your schedule. It followed the seasons, not your spreadsheet. There's peace in that, because so much of your pain has come from trying to control what needed space to unfold. You sit on the overturned crate you used to use as a stool. It's wobbly now, but it holds. From here, the view is fuller. You notice the little ecosystems that have built themselves in the corner. A bird's nest, ants tracing their roots, a spider web shining like silk armor in the late afternoon sun. You didn't plan any of this. And still, it became. You think about the parts of your life that feel abandoned, the goals shelved, the relationships paused, the healing that never seemed to arrive. What if they aren't dead ground but just soil in need of time? What if walking away didn't end the story, it just allowed it to breathe? Not everything requires your hands to grow. Some things are becoming even as you rest, even as you wait, even as you forget. The garden humbles you. It doesn't need your guilt. It doesn't ask for explanations. It just offers itself, alive, chaotic, beautiful. And so you ask yourself now with a gentler tone, what have you left behind and might it still be growing without you? You stand in the middle of your kitchen, staring at the microwave timer. 2 minutes. Why does it feel so long? You've become so conditioned, trained like a racehorse at the sound of a bell, to equate stillness with inefficiency. Waiting feels like a gap, an error, something to fix with scrolling, snacking, swiping. But today something tells you not to distract yourself. Just wait. So you stand. You listen to the hum of the appliance. You notice the soft buzz of the fridge, the ticking of the wall clock, the distant murmur of traffic outside. These sounds, always there, but usually drowned out by your rush to fill silence with something louder. And then it hits you. You don't know how to wait without performing impatience. Pacing, checking your phone, tapping your fingers, all little acts that say, see, I'm not wasting time, I'm preparing, I'm productive. But who are you performing that for? No one's watching, except maybe you. You think back to the Stoic idea that time is a possession, and yet we treat it like a predator. We run from it, race it, complain about how little of it we have, but we rarely sit down with it, rarely just spend it. And maybe that's the problem. You've been measuring your life in deadlines, comparing yourself to timelines that aren't yours, watching others bloom in spring, wondering why your branches are still bare, not realizing that your season might be winter, and that's okay. Nature doesn't have a clock. It has cycles. And you, despite all your calendars and reminders and endless alarms, are still a part of nature. You feel the weight of your own expectations begin to loosen. All the "I should be further by now" thoughts, all the guilt about not being who you were supposed to be at this age, at this time, in this year, all of it begins to feel unnecessary. You don't need to be on schedule. You need to be in season, and seasons don't ask permission. They come when they're ready. They leave when they're done. No amount of panic or pressure can force a tree to bloom before its time. You exhale deeply. Let your shoulders drop. The microwave beeps, but you're not rushing now. You're different, even if just for a moment. A little slower, a little softer. And maybe that's all it takes, just one pause, one deep breath, one deliberate moment of not hurrying to begin the return to yourself. You pour your tea. You sit. And in this quiet act, you start to imagine a life without the tyranny of the clock in your mind. What would it be like to wake up and not immediately judge the day by how much you can conquer? What if you measured your life not by speed but by depth? You take a sip, let the warmth fill you. The tea tastes better somehow, not because it's different but because you are. You're present, you're not gulping, you're not multitasking, you're here. It reminds you of a Stoic line, not one of the famous ones, but one you scribbled once in the margin of a book. To live slowly is not to fall behind. It is to fall inward. You think about that now. You think about how long you've been falling outward, chasing, proving, reaching, and how few times you've allowed yourself to fall inward. You don't need more time. You need more awareness of the time you already have. And so the kitchen becomes your temple, the tea your ritual, the breath your prayer. You've stopped measuring. You've started being. And in this gentle shift, a question surfaces, not sharp, not demanding, but curious. What would your life feel like if you stopped racing the clock and started living by your own rhythm? It was one of those near misses. You almost said yes to something your gut quietly resisted. A job, a move, a relationship that looked right on paper but felt off. Everyone told you it was a good idea. The timing seemed perfect. The pressure was high. And yet something inside you hesitated. You waited. And because you did, something passed you by. At first, you second-guessed yourself. wondered if you had missed your chance. The familiar storm rolled in, self-doubt, regret, that anxious little voice whispering, "What if that was it?" But days passed, then weeks. And eventually you saw the fallout from afar, the chaos, the collapse, the truth of what you had almost stepped into. And then the voice inside changed. "Thank God I waited." There's a Stoic principle that doesn't often get celebrated: the strength of inaction. Not apathy, not fear, but deliberate restraint. The choice not to act until your soul says yes. It takes courage to move forward, yes. But it also takes courage, deep, quiet, unseen courage, to pause. You think of all the disasters you've almost stepped into, the words you nearly said in anger, the emails you almost sent, the commitments you almost made in the heat of loneliness or desperation. How many of those moments were saved, not because you were brilliant or disciplined, but simply because you paused, because you waited? You remember a day, maybe not long ago, when you were filled with tension. Everything felt urgent. You wanted answers, movement, certainty. But something, a nap, a walk, a breath, softened you just long enough to stop you from acting on impulse. Now, in retrospect, that pause feels like a miracle. You see now that waiting isn't always about time. Sometimes it's about protection. We don't always know what we're being saved from until much later. The Stoics spoke of the inner citadel, that part of the self untouched by the world's chaos. But to reach it, you often have to sit still while everything in you wants to bolt, fix, solve. To wait is to trust that your safety doesn't always come from movement, that your dignity can live in your delay. You think about a tree in a storm. It doesn't try to outrun the wind. It doesn't panic. It bends, it waits, it weathers. You are no different. You've bent. You've waited, you've survived. Maybe this isn't the story of what you missed. Maybe this is the story of what missed you and was never meant to stay. You look back and start to see a pattern. Times when the pause felt excruciating but ended up sparing you pain. Times when waiting looked like weakness, but was actually deep intuition protecting your path. You think about how, if you had forced things, you'd be stuck somewhere misaligned with your values, with people who didn't see you, doing things that looked good to the world but felt hollow in your chest. You remember the feeling of almost giving yourself away and the sacredness of the moment you didn't. This isn't about being passive. It's about discernment. The world will often pressure you to just do something, but your soul might be whispering, "Wait. Wait for clarity. Wait for calm. Wait until the yes feels honest, not desperate." You don't have to answer every invitation. You don't have to act on every impulse. You don't owe the world your reaction. You owe yourself your truth. And in this slow, steady realization, another question rises. What are you being quietly protected from simply because you chose to wait? You're leaning against a railing, overlooking a quiet patch of trees. The air is still, the sky soft with early light. And then you see it, a bird perched on a thin branch. It's not flying, just sitting. Wings tucked, body calm. It blinks, tilts its head, looks around. The world is wide open to it, endless sky in every direction, and yet it chooses to stay. You watch for a while, expecting it to launch. Any moment now. But it doesn't, not yet. And slowly, you feel something shift in your chest. You realize you've been expecting the bird to move because that's what birds are supposed to do. Right? They fly, they soar. They don't just sit and be, but this one does. And in its stillness, you begin to see something you rarely notice. Strength doesn't always announce itself with motion. Sometimes it's stillness that reveals the most power. You remember what Seneca wrote: "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." And you think, maybe adversity doesn't always look like conflict. Maybe sometimes it looks like waiting, like resisting the urge to rush, like staying on the branch. You think about all the times you felt like you needed to fly, to move, to achieve, to get going, even when your body was begging you to rest, even when your soul was whispering, "Not yet." But pressure is a loud thing, and rest a quiet one. The bird is still there, not flinching, not fussing, just present. And you realize it's not that it's unwilling to fly. It's that it knows it doesn't have to, not now. The danger isn't real. The moment doesn't require escape. It can simply be. How much of your own movement has come from imagined threat? How many times have you launched into action just to quiet the discomfort of being still? You let the question sit, and you begin to wonder, what if stillness is not the opposite of strength, but its expression? You look again at the bird. Its presence commands more attention than if it had darted across the sky. Its patience is magnetic. It waits because it can, because it trusts itself to know when it's time to act. That's a kind of mastery you long for, a quiet knowing. You recall moments when you acted too soon, made choices out of panic, spoke before listening, moved before understanding. There's no shame in it, just the ache of hindsight, but now you're learning. Learning that inner freedom often looks like not reacting, like letting the moment unfold rather than wrestling it into shape. The bird finally shifts. It flutters its wings, a subtle stir. And then, without ceremony, it lifts into the sky, not in a rush, not with panic, but with purpose. And somehow, that lift means more because of how long it waited. You feel that in your bones. Maybe you don't need to fly yet. Maybe your power right now is in your perch, in your choice to observe, to breathe, to hold. The world tells you that your value lies in action, but the bird teaches otherwise. So you step back from the railing, still watching the empty branch. It's no longer empty. It holds a memory, a metaphor, a truth you needed. And as the wind brushes your face, you ask yourself, what would it feel like to trust your stillness as deeply as you've trusted your speed? You're walking, no destination, no time limit, just letting your feet take you where they will. The sky is heavy with late afternoon light, not quite golden, not yet fading. Somewhere in the distance a dog barks. A breeze stirs the leaves, and for once there's nothing urgent pulling at you. You're not late, you're not being productive. You're just here, present, liberated. And for the first time in a long while you begin to feel it, freedom. Not the kind that comes from having everything you want or from having nothing to lose, but the kind that arises from a quiet mind. A mind that isn't arguing with reality. A mind that has nothing to prove. You stop to watch a line of ants crossing the pavement. One is carrying a crumb 3 times its size. The others make way, no complaints, no envy, just rhythm. You crouch down, fascinated, and realize, this moment wouldn't have happened if you were rushing. You would have missed it like you've missed so many tiny marvels in your haste to reach the next thing. You think of the Stoics again, of that line from Marcus Aurelius. People seek retreats for themselves in the country, by the sea, in the hills, but you yourself are not allowed to go anywhere without yourself. Withdraw into yourself. And maybe that's what this walk is. Not a vacation, not an escape, but a return to the self that exists beneath the hustle. The self that doesn't need to hurry to be whole. The pace of the walk becomes your meditation. You start to notice how much of your life has been built around the illusion that faster is better. That stillness is laziness. That wandering is wasted. But right now, every step away from purpose feels like a step closer to peace. You remember a time when you were obsessed with optimization, trying to make every moment useful. Podcasts while driving, email during breakfast. Even your rest had to be productive, yoga with a side of achievement. But this walk is different. There's no why, no for. It just is. And somehow that makes it sacred. You pass a garden fence. Vines twist through the slats. Someone has left a bowl of water out for stray cats. A small, ordinary kindness. You smile not because it's extraordinary, but because it isn't. It's just someone doing something gentle with no expectation of reward. It occurs to you that much of life's meaning might lie in moments just like this. The unspectacular ones. The unmonetized, unmeasured, unpublicized ones. You've spent so much time chasing freedom, only to realize now that you had it backwards. Freedom isn't doing whatever you want. It's not needing to. It's the quiet joy of being where you are without trying to be somewhere else. You slow down even more just to feel the gravel under your shoes, the way your arms swing, the beat of your heart, steady content. And you wonder, What would your days look like if more of them were like this? Not crammed with goals, but open with curiosity. Not ruled by obligation, but guided by rhythm. The world may not reward this pace, but your soul does. And maybe that's the point. You think of the bird again from earlier, still before it flew. You think of the tree that grows so slowly you only notice after years have passed. And now you think of yourself not running, not chasing, just moving with grace. You begin to believe that you don't need to rush to keep up with the world. You just need to walk in rhythm with yourself. And so the question rises, as quietly and naturally as your breath. What would it mean to move through your life, not as a race to win, but as a walk worth remembering? You're sitting across from someone you care about. They're talking not urgently, not excitedly, just openly. Their words fall like small stones in a still pond, and you're listening, really listening, not waiting to respond, not planning what you'll say next, not mentally comparing your story to theirs. You're simply there. And in that presence, something sacred happens. Time bends. You feel it slow, soften, expand. You're not in a hurry to move the conversation forward. You're not trying to fix them, or redirect them, or fill the space with your own echo. You're allowing what is without resistance, without control. And in this unforced stillness, a new understanding arises. Waiting isn't always about time. Sometimes it's about space. The space to listen, to witness, to be with someone or something without turning it into a task. The Stoics spoke often of being useful to others, of living in accordance with reason and nature, of not wasting time. But their wisdom wasn't cold efficiency. It was presence with purpose, and purpose doesn't always require movement. Sometimes it requires stillness, the kind that holds. You remember times when someone didn't rush you, when they waited for you to find your words, when they let you cry without trying to solve you, when they stayed, not because they had the answers, but because they didn't need to. And how rare that kind of waiting is. You think about all the relationships that have suffered not because of cruelty or conflict, but because of hurry. The need to get to the point, to tidy the mess, to close the conversation. But human connection isn't efficient. It's not a box to check. It's a living thing. And like all living things, it breathes best when given time. You notice how your body feels in this moment, soft, grounded, unguarded. The conversation with this person is still going, but it's become something more than talk. It's communion, a subtle exchange of spirit. They pause, maybe unsure, maybe vulnerable. You don't rush in. You hold the silence like a gift. You let it stretch. And then they go on, relieved, like someone finally allowed to exhale. And this is the paradox you begin to understand. To truly connect, you must be willing to wait for trust, to wait for truth, to wait for the other person's rhythm to reveal itself. We often try to shortcut this. We finish their sentences. We jump to conclusions. We read between the lines when what's really needed is just to wait. Let it arrive when it's ready. The Stoics didn't equate control with strength. Quite the opposite. They warned against the illusion that we can bend others or even life to our will. Real strength, they said, is in accepting what is and in serving what comes. You feel that now. That not doing can be an act of care. That not speaking can be an act of trust. That waiting, not passively, but attentively, can be one of the most loving things you offer another human being. And as your friend keeps speaking, the conversation begins to unfold like petals. Not rushed, not pried open, just allowed to become. You realize how many things in life are like this. They require presence, not pressure. Patience, not performance. You look up. The light between you is soft now. Time is still passing, but neither of you seem to mind. Something deeper is happening, something beyond minutes and meaning. And so you sit, grateful for the unhurried beauty of this connection. And later, when you walk home, that moment lingers. You feel different, like someone who's touched something eternal, not loud, not dramatic, just real. And tonight, as you settle into the quiet again, one question remains. What could grow in your relationships if you stopped trying to rush understanding and started waiting with love? It's raining. Not hard, not urgently. just a soft, steady rhythm against the windows. The kind of rain that doesn't ask for attention but quietly soaks everything in patience. You sit near the window, warm drink in hand, watching droplets gather, slide, disappear. One after another, a slow procession of surrender, and something inside you mirrors that rhythm. You're not thinking about the errands left undone or the tasks that waited all week. You're just here, wrapped in a quiet you didn't earn but somehow deserve. There's something about the rain that disarms you. Maybe it's the way it silences the noise outside, or the way it invites slowness without apology. You don't have to move quickly in the rain. No one expects it. Even the world slows down. And as you sit there, you begin to realize waiting is not wasted when it makes space for renewal. We are so trained to resist pause, to fight delay. But the rain reminds you, sometimes delay is nourishment. Sometimes what looks like a stall is actually the season preparing you for bloom. The Stoics knew this. They often spoke of aligning with nature, not resisting it. They didn't expect the rose to bloom in winter. And neither should you expect yourself to be always producing, always creating, always on. Stillness has seasons too. And this quiet afternoon in the rain is one of them. You sip slowly. You let your thoughts stretch out not as problems to solve but as guests to greet. You don't force them into categories. You just watch them arrive, drift, disappear. One thought sticks longer than the rest. It's an old one, a version of you that felt guilty for not doing enough, not becoming enough, not arriving fast enough. You sit with that voice for a moment, and then you realize that voice has no power here, not in the rain, not in this slowness that refuses to measure your worth by your output. There's a phrase from Epictetus: don't explain your philosophy, embody it. You think about that now, how easy it is to talk about peace, but how radical it is to practice it. To be in a space where you could be doing something useful, but choose instead to be still. To let the rain fall. To let the moment breathe. This is not idleness. This is deep participation with life. You think of how many ideas you've had during moments like this. How many insights arrived not when you forced them, but when you allowed space for them to land. Your creativity doesn't thrive in pressure, it thrives in permission. And the rain gives you that. You begin to see waiting not as absence but as gestation, like the dark soil before the sprout, like the cocoon before the wings. Something is forming even if you can't name it yet. The rain continues. You place your empty cup down, stretch your limbs, and notice how alive your stillness feels, how much motion exists inside this seeming pause. You are not stuck. You are steeping. You are becoming, just not on anyone else's timeline. And maybe this is the grace of waiting. Not that it changes the world around you, but that it allows the world within you to shift, soften, awaken. So now, as the storm hums and the light dims, you ask yourself gently, what quiet growth might be happening within you right now beneath the surface of waiting? You find yourself revisiting an old journal, not to mine it for insight, not to cringe at your younger self, but simply to witness the trail of your becoming. The pages are worn, the ink faded in places. Some entries are long and detailed, others barely a sentence. But every word carries the weight of a moment once lived. You notice something curious. The entries written during times of waiting, between jobs, between heartbreaks, between certainties, have a different texture, less linear, more reflective, as if those moments, though hard to endure, had depth the faster seasons lacked. And in reading them, you begin to see the pattern. Waiting is not a void, but a vessel. It holds things, feelings you hadn't processed, truths you weren't ready to face, growth that needed more time, more quiet, more space than the world usually offers. You flip to an entry from a winter long ago. You'd written about feeling lost, uncertain, stuck in a fog of not knowing. Back then, you thought you were wasting time. But now, from this vantage point, you see clearly that season made you. Not with results, with roots. That time underground, unseen, uncelebrated was not the absence of progress. It was the deep, quiet work of preparation. The Stoics would nod at this. Marcus Aurelius, in all his power as emperor, journaled like a student. He wrote not for others but for himself, a practice of returning to what mattered, returning to the kind of strength that doesn't depend on outcomes. You feel that now, as your fingers rest on the old pages. A sense of reverence for the parts of your journey that no one applauded, that maybe no one even noticed. The parts where you simply kept showing up, uncertain but steady. You close the journal and sit back. Let your mind drift to your current season. Are you waiting again, probably, for something to begin or end, for a person to return, for a dream to take shape? And yet, maybe you're no longer viewing the wait as a problem. Maybe, just maybe, it's the container for your becoming again. You remember that even the sun doesn't rise quickly. There is a long stretch of twilight before light breaks. And no one rushes it. We simply wait with trust, with wonder. Could you meet your own process that way? Could you honor your not yet as much as you chase your finally? You breathe in, deeply, then out. And for the first time in a while, the waiting feels less like suspension and more like belonging. Because this time you're not filling the pause with distraction. You're feeling it. You're asking what it holds. And you're starting to believe that the self who emerges from this quiet won't be a product of productivity, but of presence. You sit a while longer, hands in your lap, no rush to move. This is the part of the story where nothing dramatic happens, but everything real is forming. So you whisper to yourself, not as a mantra, not as a command, but as a truth. This waiting is doing something to me. And it is. And so you ask yourself now, not as a demand for answers, but as an offering. What is your waiting shaping in you that rushing never could? You walk past a construction site. Behind the fences and tarps, you hear the slow echo of work, shovels against stone, the low hum of a generator, the faint murmur of voices calling across scaffolding. But from the street there's nothing beautiful yet. Just dust. Just noise. Just the bones of something unfinished. Most people pass by without a glance. But you stop. Not because the sight is special, but because something about it mirrors your own life, the mess, the in-betweenness, the sense that you are becoming something but can't quite say what. And you realize, not all beauty is visible in the middle. In fact, most of it isn't. You think of all the photos you've seen of grand cathedrals, shining marble, soaring domes, perfect symmetry, and you remember. Each of them lived years, sometimes centuries, as incomplete, walls half-built, roofs open to the weather, foundations holding nothing but air. No one posts pictures of that, but the Stoics would tell you that's where the real work is. Because waiting isn't about standing still, it's about enduring the unseen effort. The days when the foundation is being poured, when the work isn't glamorous but essential. You remember your own construction sites, the friendships you rebuilt after betrayal, the self-worth you slowly patched together after heartbreak, the resilience you crafted quietly when the world gave you every reason to collapse. No one applauded those days, but they were sacred. You think of how easily we dismiss what isn't finished. How often we criticize the parts of our lives that aren't yet polished, the body in progress, the skill not mastered, the relationship still finding its rhythm. And yet, aren't these the parts that require the most faith? The belief that something solid is being made, even when all you can see is scaffolding. You stand there, watching the site, and wonder what someone might say if they judged the building now. If they said, "It's ugly, it doesn't make sense, it's not worth anything," they'd be wrong, and so would you when you speak that way about your own life. The unfinished is not unworthy. The in progress is not inferior, it's just becoming. You remember the Stoic metaphor of the archer. He prepares the shot, aims carefully, draws the bowstring, but once the arrow is released, the outcome is no longer his. His job is in the process, not the result. You are in your drawing phase. And that's not lesser. That's the core of what it means to live with intention. The workers on the site keep building, whether people understand what they're making or not. They have blueprints, vision, discipline. They don't need applause to keep laying brick after brick. Could you live like that? Could you honor your own building phase, the quiet habits, the repeated healing, the mornings you get up even when nothing feels finished? You breathe it in. You believe it, and maybe the question isn't, when will it be done? Maybe it's, what if the most meaningful parts of your life are happening right now, in the dust, in the mess, in the middle? It's late. You're lying in bed, lights off, ceiling barely visible in the dim blue hue of the night. The hum of the fan is constant, like a slow breath repeating in the background. There's no one needing anything from you now. No inbox, no pressure. Just the quiet company of your own thoughts, and the question that always seems to return when the world gets quiet. Am I doing enough? It sneaks in with a soft, familiar weight. You don't panic, you just let it come. You've learned that resisting these thoughts gives them more power, but noticing them, letting them pass through, that's where your freedom lives, so you lie still. And remember, you are not only what you do. You are not only the things crossed off your list, not only your productivity, your achievements, your progress. You are also the person who paused, the one who listened, the one who waited when others rushed, who breathed when others broke, who stayed gentle when the world got sharp. This still moment at the end of the day is not empty, it's full of presence. The Stoics believe that the only true possession is your character, your soul, shaped slowly by your choices. Not your status, not your wealth, not your accolades, but the way you respond to the world when it asks for your attention, your patience, your restraint. And isn't that what waiting really is? Not the absence of action, but the exercise of restraint in service of something deeper. You think back on today. There were things you didn't finish, conversations that stayed open, emotions you couldn't yet name. But there were also moments of presence. That glance exchanged with a stranger, the breath you remembered to take, the reaction you didn't give in the heat of frustration. These things don't